When my parents died, everything changed overnight. One moment, we were a family, messy and imperfect but ours. The next, I was being pulled apart from the only home I'd ever known. My brother and I, just two boys thrown into a world that suddenly felt cold and unrecognizable. I was 10, my brother only 7. We didn't understand why mom and dad didn't come home one day. The ambulance, the hospital, the whispered words of grown-ups that made no sense. And then the silence, the unbearable silence where their voices used to be. After the funeral, everything became a blur of questions and decisions that I had no control over. Our grandparents, who lived a few states away, came to visit. They cried and hugged us, promising to take care of us both. But promises, I was learning, could be broken. A few days later, I overheard a conversation between my grandparents and a social worker. They wanted to adopt my little brother but not me. Their reason was chilling: boys are harder to raise, they said, especially teenagers. Your brother is still young, we can manage him better. I was only 10, barely a teenager, but that didn't matter. To them, I was already too much trouble. The thought that they wanted one of us but not both cut deeper than I could explain. My brother didn't know what was happening, he was just happy to be with them. But I was sent away to foster care, to a system that felt like a maze with no exit. Living in foster care was like living in a house full of strangers, where no one wanted to stay and no one really cared. Families came and went, some kind, some cruel. I learned quickly to keep my guard up, to pretend I was okay when I was anything but. I missed my brother desperately. We wrote letters, but they were few and far between, and my heart ached every time I read his words. School became both a refuge and a battlefield. I wanted to learn, to prove I was worth something, but the weight of abandonment followed me. Teachers tried to help, but how could anyone understand the boy who'd lost everything? I fought with the unfairness of it all. Why was my brother chosen and not me? Was it because I was older? Because I was a boy? The questions haunted me, but answers never came. I learned to rely on myself, to build a shield so strong that no one could break through. Years passed in a blur of homes and faces. But through it all, a fire burned inside me, a determination to survive, to find my place in the world. I promised myself that one day, I'd reunite with my brother, that we'd rebuild what was lost. The journey wasn't easy. I faced setbacks, heartbreak, and moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But every time I felt like falling, I remembered my parents' love, the hope in my brother's letters, and the promise I made to myself. Eventually, I found people who cared: mentors, friends, even foster parents who saw beyond my scars. They helped me heal, helped me believe that family isn't just about blood, but about who chooses to stand by you. When I finally reunited with my brother years later, it was like coming home after a long, lonely journey. We were different, changed by our separate paths, but the bond remained unbroken. Together, we began to write a new story, one where love and resilience conquered loss. This is my story. A story of pain, survival, and hope. A story of a boy who was left behind but never gave up on family. In those early days of foster care, I felt like a ghost in my own life. The house was strange and unfamiliar, with creaky floors and the smell of someone else's home, not mine. My foster parents were kind enough, but I could see the hesitation in their eyes, how they didn't really know what to do with a kid like me. I was quiet, withdrawn, carrying the weight of my parents' death and the sting of being separated from my brother. School was hard. I wasn't just the kid with no parents, I was the kid with no family, the kid who had been rejected by the people who were supposed to love him most. I remember sitting in the cafeteria, watching other kids laugh with their families, feeling like an outsider looking in. But I also found small pockets of kindness: teachers who stayed after class to help me catch up, classmates who didn't ask questions but just included me. Letters from my brother became my lifeline. He was young, but his words were full of hope and love. "I miss you," he'd write. "I want to see you again." Those letters were tattered from being read and reread, but I kept every single one. They were reminders that I wasn't alone, even when everything felt like it was falling apart. As I grew older, the foster care system threw more challenges my way. I was moved to different homes, sometimes because my behavior was too much for the foster families to handle. I wasn't perfect. I was angry and scared and confused. But beneath it all, I was just a kid trying to survive. There were moments of deep loneliness, nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my brother was thinking of me too. I longed for the days when we were kids playing together, dreaming about the future. It felt like those memories belonged to someone else, a happier version of me that had been stolen. But I didn't give up. I buried myself in schoolwork, sports, anything that could distract me from the pain. I learned to fight for myself, to speak up when I needed help. Slowly, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future beyond foster care. When I turned 18, the system let me go officially an adult, officially on my own. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. I had no family to fall back on, no safety net. But I had the promise I made to myself to find my brother, to build a life where we could be together again. I started searching. I contacted social workers, lawyers, anyone who might help me find him. It wasn't easy, records were incomplete. People had moved. But I didn't stop. Every small lead was a step closer. Finally, after years of searching, I found him. He was living with our grandparents, who had adopted him like they promised. He looked different, older, but when he saw me, his eyes filled with recognition and tears. We embraced, the years of separation melting away in that moment. Rebuilding our relationship wasn't instant. We had to navigate the pain and confusion of the past, the years we'd lost. But we talked openly, shared our stories, and slowly, the brotherhood that had been interrupted began to heal. We made new memories, late night talks, family dinners, supporting each other through life's ups and downs. It wasn't the perfect family we once dreamed of, but it was ours. And that was enough. Looking back, I understand why things happened the way they did. It wasn't fair, and it still hurts. But those hardships shaped me into who I am: a survivor, a fighter, a brother who never gave up. My story is one of loss, but also of hope. Of finding family not just in blood, but in love and perseverance. And I carry that story with me every day, a reminder that no matter what life throws at you, you can rise again. Reconnecting with my brother after all those years was both joyous and challenging. The moment we found each other, I thought the missing pieces would just fall into place, but real life is never that simple. We were different now, shaped by separate experiences, different pains, and separate hopes. There was so much to catch up on, so much to understand. Our first few meetings were awkward. We talked about the big things, our parents, the years apart, but also stumbled over the small stuff. What was his favorite food now? Did he still like the same music? Did he remember our childhood games? Sometimes, silence filled the gaps, but we learned that was okay too. He told me about life with our grandparents, how they loved him and kept him safe, but also about the loneliness he sometimes felt without me. I shared stories about foster homes, about the nights I cried myself to sleep, the teachers who believed in me, the friends I made. It was painful but healing, like stitching a torn fabric back together. One day, we sat under a tree in the park, the same park where we used to play as kids. I said, "I'm sorry you had to grow up without me around." He smiled, "I'm sorry you had to go through all that alone." In that moment, the weight of years apart lifted just a little. We weren't perfect, but we were together, and that was a new beginning. We made a pact to build a future together, to be brothers in the truest sense, no matter what. Slowly, we started spending more time as a family. We invited our grandparents to dinners, and even though there were difficult conversations about the past, we faced them honestly. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was possible. I also began to open up about my pain, the feelings of rejection and abandonment that had shaped me. Talking about those feelings didn't make me weaker, it made me stronger. My brother listened, and I listened to him, and we found strength in our shared vulnerability. Rebuilding my trust in family was a journey. I learned that family isn't just about biology or who raises you, but about who loves you through your darkest times. My grandparents, despite their earlier choices, showed me that they wanted to be part of my life now. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. As I stepped into adulthood, I held tightly to the lessons foster care taught me: the value of resilience, the power of hope, and the importance of never giving up. I also learned that healing takes time and that love, even after loss and separation, can find a way to grow again. Together, my brother and I began to dream again, not just about what we lost, but about what we could build. We talked about college, careers, travel, and one day, maybe starting families of our own. We knew the road ahead wouldn't be without challenges, but we faced it side by side. Looking back, I realized that being left in foster care was a pain I carry, but it doesn't define me. Instead, it fuels my desire to create a life filled with love, compassion, and belonging for myself and for those I care about. This is my story of loss and reunion, of hardship and hope. A story that shows no matter how broken things seem, there's always a chance to find your way back home. As we stepped into adulthood, the bond between my brother and me grew stronger with every shared experience. We had both carried scars from our past, but together, those scars became reminders of how far we'd come. I enrolled in community college, determined to build a future beyond the shadows of foster care. My brother, having graduated high school a few years earlier, started working and saved up to support both of us in small ways. We were learning to lean on each other, not just as siblings, but as partners in life. We faced new challenges balancing work and school, dealing with the pressures of adult responsibilities, and navigating relationships outside our little family. There were days when the weight of our past felt heavy, when memories of abandonment crept back, and doubts whispered in the quiet moments. But on those days, we had each other. A late night phone call, a shared meal, a simple text reminding us we weren't alone. Our grandparents, too, began to play a more consistent role in our lives. It wasn't perfect. Old wounds sometimes surfaced in tense conversations, and trust had to be rebuilt slowly. But seeing them with my brother, and gradually with me, brought a bittersweet sense of closure and new beginnings. They hadn't been there for me when it mattered most, but they wanted to be there now, and that meant something. One of the most powerful moments came when my brother and I, sitting around a modest dinner table with our grandparents, openly talked about the past, the pain, the mistakes, the hopes for the future. It wasn't easy. Tears were shed. Words were spoken that had been locked away for years. But in that vulnerability, we found healing. Forgiveness wasn't instant, but it was possible. As I continued my studies, I found a passion for social work, driven by my own experiences in foster care. I wanted to help kids like me, those caught in the system, feeling lost and forgotten. My brother supported this dream wholeheartedly, encouraging me during the toughest semesters and celebrating every small victory. Together, we dreamed of making a difference, turning our pain into purpose, outside of family and school. I began to build a life filled with friendships and even found love. Navigating relationships after such a tumultuous childhood was daunting, but I approached them with honesty and openness. My partner learned about my past, about the family I'd lost and found again, and stood by me through every step of healing. It was a new kind of love, one built on trust, understanding, and patience. My brother, too, found his own path. He discovered a talent for art, using it as a way to express feelings he struggled to put into words. We encouraged each other's dreams, celebrated milestones, and supported one another through setbacks. Through it all, the pain of being separated as kids never fully disappeared. It was a thread woven into the fabric of our lives. But it no longer controlled us. Instead, it fueled a fierce determination to create a family defined not by loss, but by love, resilience, and hope. Looking back on everything, the heartbreak, the struggle, the triumphs, I'm proud of how far we've come. My brother and I have rebuilt what was broken, creating a family forged not just by blood, but by unwavering commitment to each other. Our story isn't perfect, and it never will be. But it's real. And it's ours. As the years passed, my brother and I settled into a rhythm that felt like home. We were no longer just survivors of a broken system, we were partners in life, united by shared history and a fierce commitment to each other. Our relationship, once fragile and tentative, grew stronger through every challenge and triumph. I graduated with a degree in social work, and my first job was with an organization that helped children in foster care. Every day, I walked into the office carrying the weight of my past but also the hope of making a difference. I met kids who reminded me of myself, scared and certain, but full of potential. I became their advocate, their voice, their fierce protector. I wanted to ensure that no child would feel as lost and forgotten as I once did. My brother continued to pursue his art. What started as a private outlet for his emotions soon blossomed into something beautiful and public. His paintings, raw and powerful, began to attract attention at local galleries. Art became his language, his way of telling the story. We both shared the pain, the healing, the hope. We celebrated these milestones together. The opening of his first gallery show was a night filled with laughter, tears, and pride. Our grandparents came too, standing quietly in the back, their eyes moist with unsaid apologies and newfound love. It was imperfect, but it was real. We both found love outside our brotherhood as well. I met someone who understood my past and embraced me fully, the scars, the stories, and all. My brother found a partner who celebrated his creativity and stood by him through the ups and downs. Our partners became extensions of our family, weaving their own threads into the tapestry of our lives. Together, we built traditions, Sunday dinners, birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings. We created a space where laughter outweighed sorrow and belonging outweighed loss. Our family was no longer defined by who abandoned us but by who chose to stay and love us fiercely. Looking back, I realized that the pain of being separated from my brother and thrust into foster care never truly left me. But it no longer defines me. Instead, it fuels my compassion, strengthens my resolve, and deepens my gratitude for the family we've rebuilt. Our journey has been far from easy, marked by heartbreak, struggle, and moments of doubt. But through it all, love has been our anchor. The love between brothers, between parents and children, between friends and partners. This is our story, one of loss and reunion, pain and healing, separation, and the unbreakable bonds that brought us back together. And as we move forward, hand in hand, I carry hope in my heart, to hope that no matter the darkness, family can be found, rebuilt, and forever cherished. As the years unfolded, I found myself reflecting often on the twists and turns that led me here. The boy who had once felt invisible in the foster care system had grown into a man with a purpose, a voice, and a family he'd fought hard to reclaim. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. My brother and I, though shaped by hardship, refused to let our past define our future. We were determined to break the cycle, to build lives grounded in love, trust, and kindness. It wasn't always easy. There were still days when old wounds ached, when the ghosts of rejection whispered their doubts. But together, we faced those shadows head on, refusing to be prisoners of pain. Our relationship deepened in ways I never imagined possible. We celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small, and held space through setbacks. There was a strength in knowing someone else had walked a similar path, someone who understood the language of loss and resilience without needing explanation. I threw myself into my work with renewed passion, fueled by the stories of the kids I met every day. I saw myself in them, the fear, the loneliness, the desperate hope for belonging. I became their advocate, their champion, determined to be the adult I had needed when I was young. It was difficult work, emotionally draining at times, but deeply rewarding. I know I was making a difference, one child at a time. My brother's art continued to evolve, gaining recognition far beyond our small town. His pieces captured raw emotion, pain, hope, struggle, and triumph, resonating with many who saw their own stories reflected in his brushstrokes. Watching him grow into the artist he was meant to be filled me with pride. He was telling the story we both lived, giving voice to the silent parts of our past. Together, we built a community around us, friends who became family, partners who brought love and laughter, mentors who guided us. The family I'd once lost had been rebuilt, not by circumstance, but by choice. There were moments of quiet reflection when I think about my grandparents, their decisions, their regrets, their efforts to make amends. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination. I learned to accept that they were flawed humans, just like me, capable of mistakes, but also capable of love. We found a way to coexist, imperfect but genuine. Sometimes, I wondered how different my life might have been if my brother and I had stayed together, if our grandparents had chosen differently. But those thoughts no longer held power over me. Instead, I focused on the present, the family I had now, the life I was building, the legacy I hoped to leave. I understood that family isn't always perfect or fair. Sometimes, it's messy and painful. But it's also a source of strength, hope, and healing. My story is one of loss, yes, but also of resilience and love, of finding light in the darkest places and creating a home where none seemed possible. And as I look forward, I carry with me the belief that no matter how broken things seem, the human heart has an incredible capacity to heal and to love fiercely, deeply, and endlessly.